Okay, I have a question for you, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. When was the last time you moved your body through its full range of motion? Not just walked to the office or powered through a workout, but actually intentionally moved your body through space the way it was designed to move. If that question just made you go, or WTF does she even mean? This episode is for you. Today, we are diving into one of my absolute favorite topics, and honestly, one of the most misunderstood and most underrated topics in the fitness world: mobility. And no, it's not just yoga. It's not just for flexible people, and it's definitely not optional. We're getting into the difference between flexibility and mobility, because spoiler, they are not the same thing, and the difference could possibly blow your mind. Why menopause has a direct effect on our joints and movement, the sneaky way that your desk job might be behind your chronic pain at any age, shout out to my 20-year-olds with back pain, and most importantly, how to actually build a mobility practice into your real busy life without it feeling like one more overwhelming thing that you got to put on your to-do list. So grab your coffee, get comfy, maybe even do a little hip circle while you're at it, and let's get into it. But first,
welcome to Fit After 40, the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. Kinsey here, certified personal trainer and menopause coaching specialist. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the past 12 years and know firsthand how intimidating starting a fitness routine can be, especially in perimenopause. My goal is to teach women in midlife and beyond how to feel strong and confident in their bodies and to help them live the healthy life they deserve, free of pain, heart disease, dementia, frailty, you name it. In this show, you'll get action steps you can take today, backed by the most up-to-date research and thousands of hours of practical in-gym experience. The best time to get started may have been 20 years ago, but the second best time to get started is today. Hello, and welcome to Fit After 40, Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. Coach Kinsey here, and we back, baby. I hope that you've had a lovely last 2 weeks, ? I have been out of the country. I guess I've been dropping podcasts, so maybe you haven't missed me like I've missed you. But before we dive in today, a little life update, because we were in Kenya and I'm in love. I'm in love. I 10 out of 10 recommend going. It was life-changing. There's just so much to say that I'm like, do I do a podcast on everything I've learned and felt on this trip? I don't know. I haven't figured out. I'm like, is that too vloggy? I'm not over here trying to be like a YouTube influencer. But it was one of those trips where I've just never experienced anything like that trip. And it was for so many reasons, dare I say, even spiritual at times. So anywho, dilly, that was beyond my wildest expectations and dreams, and I'm so grateful for it. And now we're back. I got back on Sunday. We had a 30-hour travel day, but it ended up working out kind of well. Fit After 40 started up bright and early on Monday, and honestly, it was daylight savings this weekend. So turns out if you don't want to feel crummy on spring forward, the trick is a 9-hour time difference, because time means nothing. We're on Tuesday, I'm pretty sure now. I think I did spend the whole trip being like, what day is this? So I'm pretty adjusted. I'm recording this at like 2:22. Oh, that's magical. 2:22. Shout out to my Geminis. And I'm hanging in. This is usually the time, yesterday at least, where I started feeling a little bit like I'm losing my mind. So we'll see how this goes, but I think it's going to be just swell. Today's episode, I'm excited to share. I'm always excited. I love hanging out with you guys. I'm excited to share because it is something that I think is deeply underrated, and not just for the menopause transition, which it's imperative for, but just across the health and fitness space, and just in like being a functioning human space. So we're talking about menopause and mobility today, but don't tune out if you're not in the menopause transition anymore or yet, because like I said, mobility is really an essential, I'm going to just call it an essential movement nutrient for our musculoskeletal system. And we're going to talk a lot about it today. This particular episode I'm going to be recording it live. I've made some tweaks, but it was originally one of the workshops that I ran for Fit After 40, strength training for menopause. So for my small group personal training programs, one of the perks, because she's nerdy, and I also believe that knowing why we do something is deeply important to keeping with it. One of the perks of being part of the Fit After 40 cohorts, whether you're online or in person, is that you get a monthly educational webinar, anything from the importance of protein and then just really deep diving into protein to muscle and mobility, which we're going to talk about today, a little bit of an abbreviated version, to muscle and menopause, obviously. I also have guest speakers on. So last month we had Brandy Sheehan on talking about her 5 fundamental food rules, which I said that wrong. 5 fundamental rules of metabolic health. We had her on the podcast recently. So, that was a doozy. But again, to me, that education is just as important as moving our body. Like I said, I know for my journey, the more that I could learn about why I'm supporting my body, the more motivated I get to do it. For example, today was my first day getting back to my strength training program after a week and a half off for this trip and after jet lag. And I did it because I know it's important for me. But if I wouldn't have known why it's important, it would have been really hard to do again. So one of the best reasons or ways to stay accountable is to educate yourself on why it's important to stay accountable. So that's a big perk. I'll talk a little bit more because the current cohorts that I'm offering for Fit After 40 are actually starting to sell out, which is exciting, particularly the morning ones in person and the online ones, which we'll talk about, because if you're listening to this and you're not in the Twin Cities, I do have a couple of spaces left in one of the online cohorts. I would love for you to jump in. Like I always talk about, limited sessions. We'll talk about it more at the end, because the other perk on top of these workshops that you get as a Fit After 40 strength training for menopause member is that you also get access to our free mobility Sunday classes. So whatever membership you have, it's an online mobility session on Sundays. Might change in the future, but the point is that you get an additional mobility session, and we'll talk about why that's so important. We'll also talk a little bit about why I created it. Spoiler, selfishly, because I know how important mobility is, but sometimes it's just hard for me to motivate on my own. So we'll chat all about that. But if you're thinking about it, if you're interested, now is the time, because these spots are gonna go fast. Like I said, online cohort is almost completely sold out, and we won't be having any more spots available until someone drops out, which hasn't happened yet. Yay! Accountability, or / when I bring on a new coach, which is looking like it's going to be in the near future. So, hi, Kinsey. Welcome back. That's my life update. It's a big one because, like I said, I haven't gone off the pod for you, but for me, it's been 2 weeks since I've been on this microphone. So let's go ahead and jump into what we're talking about: menopause and mobility. But again, just mobility in terms of an active, healthy, vibrant lifestyle at any age, really. So mobility, like so many beneficial fitness practices, often gets misinterpreted, and there's a lot of information out there that is not really that helpful, or maybe not even that correct. People often mistake mobility for being hypermobile or super flexible or like a yogi extraordinaire, when in truth, mobility is an important aspect of a healthy skeleton, period, end. And we'll talk about the definition of it in just a second. But today, we're going to be chatting about the importance of mobility in relation to ample recovery and maximizing outcomes of your strength training. That's right. Strength training gets better and more effective when we're mobilizing. We're going to talk about how mobility and our joints are affected by menopause and by aging in general. We're going to talk about the relationship between chronic pain and sedentary lifestyles. Stick around for that one. Like I've said before, A lot of the people who have come into Fit After 40 are people who have been suffering from some version of chronic pain. Generally, low back is the most common, but knees, shoulders. And these aren't just my perimenopausal clients. I actually see that my clients in their 20s and 30s have more chronic pain now than even some of my older clients. So stay tuned, because that really affects all of us. And we'll talk about why that is, on top of how to find some practices that can help get you out of that. The relationship, or we're also going to talk about the relationship, or excuse me, rather, how to build a mobility practice into your weekly routine without it feeling like a complete overhaul, and more. So we're going to be hitting some real good stuff. So let's go ahead and dive in. As you know, if you've been around this podcast, I believe in the power of words. They matter, and using them correctly is empowering, because then we know what we're talking about. And again, information is power. So let's start with the basics. Flexibility versus mobility, because these are the two that are the most commonly confused. What's the dang difference? And it turns out there is one. I know. TBH. I wasn't even like 100% sure before I did this workshop with my Fit After 40 group back in December exactly how to describe the difference. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I know they're not the same thing, but like, I don't know. Turns out it's a big one. So semantics, they matter. Let's talk about what it is. Flexibility, starting there. Flexibility is the ability of a soft tissue, so soft tissues being muscles, ligaments, and tendons, to stretch passively. We refer to a person's flexibility by their ability to use a tool, like a hand or a strap, to stretch their soft tissue through space. For example, this would mean like, I use my hands to pull my knee into my chest to stretch my hamstring. Mobility, on the other hand, is the joint, aka the place where the two bones meet, the joint's ability to actively move through a full range of motion unassisted. So this would be like, I'm in a tabletop and I'm doing hip circles. So it's my hip's ability to move, my hip joint's ability to move the leg. A helpful way to remember the difference is flexibility is passive range of motion. Mobility is active control. So you can be flexible, but still lack mobility, especially if you're not able to access that flexibility when you're under load, when you're in motion, or without assistance. So I can hold onto my foot and lift my leg pretty darn high, but when my hand's not lifting my foot up, I'm unable to get my leg that high, right? So I'm flexible, but I don't have that mobility. Again, someone can be incredibly flexible, but have very limited mobility because they don't have that developed control at the joint. And I see this a lot in practice, where people actually come in hypermobile and they actually struggle because their joints can do all this crazy stuff when put into positions, but they don't have the strength at the joint to actually control unassisted. And that can be dangerous, right? So I told you there's a big difference. Feel free to pause this episode and allow your mind to be fully blown, because mine was. Welcome back. Carrying on. Why is mobility more important than ever, no matter what age you are? I'm so glad you asked. When we have tight muscles and weakened or underactive joints, our skeleton is moving through space as a result of movement compensation. So the wrong muscles are moving our skeletons through space. Oftentimes, people will attribute their lack of mobility and flexibility to things like aging and working out. And while both of these do play a role in losing or compromising both mobility and flexibility, if no preventable actions are taken, one of the most common reasons people of any age and any activity level find themselves tight, achy, and unable to touch their toes is in large part due to our society's shift to a more sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary lifestyle, right? So we're thinking sitting at a desk for work, sitting in a car to get to and from work, and then sitting on the couch at home to binge watch whatever we're watching right now. I know if you're like me, you spent 6 hours watching Heated Rivalry, so no shade in the game. All of this sedentary lifestyle, however, has been holding our bodies in locked positions, leading to muscle imbalances, leading to injury, and more. So there is this principle in physiology called Davy's Law. shout out to Davey, whoever you are. It states that soft tissue, so again, muscles, tendons, ligaments, remodel and strengthen or weaken based on the loads placed on them. So when we hold our muscles in positions like sitting for extended amounts of time, when we work or commute, or again, are binging all the episodes of Heated Rivalry, our muscles, tendons, and ligaments tighten and repattern based on those positions. This causes muscular imbalances up and down our kinetic chain, and it pulls our bones and joints out of alignment, leading to chronic pain and injury. So let's just, for an example, take a second to pull back and focus on the lower body in a seated position. The angle of our knee to our hip when we're seated leads to overactive or tight hip flexors and adductors, the inner thighs, as well as underactive glutes, hamstring, and core. This leads to more than just feeling tight. Mechanically, when we have tight hip flexors, we're pulling our pelvis into what's called an anterior pelvic tilt, or if you're like, that means nothing to me, basically your butt sticks out, right? So we have the butt jutting out, pulling our core out of activation. This leads to everything from back issues to SI joint pain to sciatica to that stomach bulge in the front, weakened abdominal muscles, non-specific groin pain, and more. So this anterior pelvic tilt is incredibly common and oftentimes the root of a lot of these chronic issues. I see it a lot in women too, because we just like societally have been taught to stand with our tushy out. When we wear heels too, we have a tendency to kind of pop the butt out. This is just one relationship between sedentary lifestyles and chronic pain. In truth, most skeletal and muscular pain can often be traced back to muscle imbalances that are rooted in these sedentary behaviors. Foot pain, knee pain, hip pain, slipped discs, trapped nerves, neck pain, shoulder injuries, headaches. Marcus Mahabi even had a phase where he was writing a lot in one position. He's since become very aware of it, but he got tinnitus from the tension in the neck. So it leads to everything. Going back to focusing on sitting real fast and its relationship to activity in the gym, when we're looking at the seated position, it also causes in our movements for the hip flexors to overcompensate in movement patterns and take over the work that the glutes and hamstrings should be performing. So fun fact, oftentimes I have clients who come in and when I'm doing an assessment, they'll say something along the lines of, I have really tight hamstrings. But the underlying issue is actually that they have tight hip flexors and underactive glute/butt muscles. The result is that their glutes aren't firing properly, so the hamstrings, as the synergists, they help the glutes start to take over instead of the glutes doing the work, and they end up fatiguing and getting sore. This is really common too. I see it a lot when people are runners, where they have really tight hamstrings after they run because they're not warming up and activating their glutes properly. So they're going right from sitting with really tight hip flexors into running, which means their hip flexors are taking over, their butts are offline, and their hamstrings get really tired because they're doing all the work. So in this instance, the answer isn't to do more hamstring stretches. It's actually to stretch the quads, activate the glutes, and bring more range of motion/mobility into the hip girdle. Again, if you need to pause and let your mind get blown, do it, sister. It's worth it. Never mind. I'm not even going to. Hannah, my sister, doesn't listen to this, but she would make mad fun of me because this is one of my biggest pet peeves. And also, I am going into this. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. And also, as someone who has trained a lot of personal trainers and coaches, a big indication to me that a coach is green or hasn't done a lot of continuing education when their solution to someone saying they have tight tight hamstrings is to give them more hamstring stretches. That to me is an indication that a coach doesn't really necessarily probably have a handle on movement mechanics yet. They're not a bad coach. They just have a lot to learn. There was one particular instance when Hannah and I took a class together and I was in deep luteal phase and she heard me talk a lot about how pissed I was that this coach kept giving this man more and more hamstring stretches for what was clearly, you could see the anterior pelvic tilt. Anyway, point is, this is also why it's important to work with a trainer and why it's important to find a trainer who knows body mechanics. I am getting off my soapbox. Let's move on. So why is mobility an important pairing for strength training? We've talked about a little bit, right? We've talked about how it pulls you out of alignment. So there's a lot of reasons, but we're going to focus on 6 and we're going to move through them rather quickly. So the first one is that mobility helps to return muscles to appropriate resting length, which helps to support with better force production and improves joint positioning. So when we have our muscles re-lengthened, so this is kind of mobility and flexibility. Remember, when we exercise, we're shortening the muscle with contraction, and then we lengthen in the extension as we release. So we contract and we release the muscle and get longer. But in that contraction, we are eccentric. Wow, I could not think of the word eccentric. Contraction and eccentric movement. But when we contract, we're shortening that fiber. And a lot of times we can leave muscles in tightened positions, which means that when we have a joint, there's always going to be at least 2 muscles pulling on the joint. So one's going to pull it in one direction, the other is going to pull it into the other. So think of one pulling into flexion, one pulling into extension. If we're not re-lengthening, one of those muscles is going to stay tighter, right? So we're going to stay with one that's overactive, which means that our joint is going to be out of alignment. So when we can work mobility and flexibility, we improve joint positioning, which brings us to our second point, which is that it enhances strength and performance. It allows for a full range of motion, allowing you to engage more muscle fibers. So when done correctly, a squat should be a very beneficial glute exercise. However, a lot of us lack mobility at our hips and at our ankles, surprisingly. So we're not able to get into a range of motion that allows us to target the tushies. It also helps to generate more power and perform exercises more efficiently. Like I said, deeper squats, better overhead presses. And because we're in proper alignment, we're actually targeting the muscles that we want to be targeting, which brings me to the next one. 3, it helps prevent injury. Stiff joints, tight muscles, these lead to imbalances and those compensations we were talking about, which over time, when continued to put load on those imbalances, you're going to lead to things like strains and tears. Remember what we talked about when all that shiznat went south when we talked about sitting for too long, right? And that was just sitting too long. Mobility ensures that joints move freely and safely under load. So honestly, that is the number one reason most people come into injuries, right? Is because we're moving incorrectly and we are with an incorrect balance in the muscles. Improves form and technique. Number 4, good mobility ensures that you can achieve proper alignment. Like we said, this means that the right muscles do the work, not your joints and your connective tissue. That's another thing. And if you hear me in class ever or in our sessions, you hear me say a lot of things like, if you feel it in your knees or feel it in your elbows, stop. We're not working your joints. We're working your muscle, right? So we don't want to feel movements in our joints. Remember that when we're thinking about tendons and ligaments, they have significantly less blood flow than our muscles. They also have significantly less mitochondria than our muscles. So when we hurt a tendon or ligament, it takes a very long time to heal versus when we move correctly and are activating our muscles, which is what we're looking for. So I always say when I'm working with clients, I'm watching your form, but if you do start to feel knee, low back, elbow, that's not permission to push through it and see if we get, we'll just push through the pain. No. That is an indication your body is letting you know that something is out of alignment. So a couple of really common examples for that inhibit proper form and technique. Limited ankle mobility is like the number one thing that restricts squat depth and stability, and it is incredibly common. I would argue that most people I work with come in with limited ankle mobility. Poor shoulder mobility, another really big one. Again, both of these come from sitting a lot. Poor shoulder mobility, ankle mobility too, though. If you're wearing a lot of heels, right, you're constantly held in plantar flexion. Poor shoulder mobility makes overhead pressing really awkward and painful and doesn't really allow for range of motion. That's something that we can start building in with time. So I usually start people with lighter weights, and we're moving through that pattern just to start creating that shape. I also give them warm-ups that take them onto a wall, helping mobilize through the shoulder joint. But these are all things that you can get over time. Tight hip flexors and hamstrings can force incorrect patterns in deadlifts and lunges, right? Because if you're in that anterior pelvic tilt, you're going to have trouble accessing the core. You're going to be having trouble hitting that hinge pattern in general. Next up, mobility helps to boost recovery by dynamic mobility work increases blood flow, delivering nutrients to muscles, reducing soreness, and helping tissues stay pliable. It also helps to promote longevity. By maintaining joint health and movement quality, we are building stronger, more resilient bodies that function better as we age, preventing stiffness and limitations. And finally, our sixth, incorporating functional movement. Most exercise we do in our sessions when we're doing strength training are on one plane of motion to target specific muscles and joints. And while that is very beneficial to building muscle and to building strength, it doesn't necessarily mimic daily movement, right? Throughout the day, our body is twisting and turning. We sit in a desk and we reach behind us for coffee on the opposite table, or we pick our keys up off the floor while carrying 3 bags of groceries and a case of bubbly waters, or we're chasing after our kiddos on the playground while the dog tugs us on the leash in the opposite direction, chasing a squirrel. So our world is 360. So we need to make sure that our movements are. And that's where mobility really comes into play. Because like I said, standing or working in those traditional single planes of motion, thinking things like squats, deadlifts, lunges, all these things, they're necessary to build strength and to build muscle. But that's why we need to pair it with this mobility so that we bring in that functional movement as well. So what if I just actually love yoga? I do love yoga, for the record. Can I replace strength training? No, you can't. I'm sorry. Yoga and mobility have a slew of incredible benefits for our body and brain. Keep on keeping on, but they don't build muscle on their own. That's why we approach things like yoga and mobility with strength training as what we call cross training. We'll talk about at the end of this podcast how to fit more mobility into your world. But in the meantime, if you are someone like this kid who loves yoga, it does make getting mobility in a little bit easier because you probably look forward to getting your class or practice in. If this is the case, huzzah! But remember, we also need to prioritize muscle build. So just as an example, if you have 3 days a week that you can dedicate to your workouts, keep 2 of them as total body strength days, and then your third one as your favorite yoga class. If this is not you, do not worry. As I mentioned, we have a lot of practical tips we will discuss at the end. And just for quick clarification, not all mobility is yoga. So if yoga is not your cup of tea, you're not SOL. Let's talk about menopause's effect on our joints and mobility. Remember estrogen, specifically estradiol, E2, our Beyonce hormone? We talk about it a lot on this pod, but the one form of estrogen that is produced primarily by our ovaries in our reproductive years, and the gal who goes bye-bye as we travel through estradiol. We have receptors, estradiol receptors, all over our body. So as levels drop in perimenopause, one of the most common symptoms women experience, achy joints and muscles, as well as reduced mobility. We're not really going to talk about it deep dive today, but frozen shoulder is one of those really common things that a lot of women experience as well. So loss of estradiol leads to decreased cartilage quality. Cartilage can become more brittle, less shock absorbent, and can lead to more wear and tear in the joints, especially in weight-bearing joints like knees, hips, and low back. Estradiol also has a strong anti-inflammatory effect. As it declines, inflammation goes up. One of the leading results is more pain throughout the body. Estradiol is also bone protectant, helping to maintain bone density. As it declines, women become more and more prone to osteoporosis or porous bones, thus placing more stress on the joints and the bones. Estradiol also helps to maintain synovial fluid, which is the liquid in the cavity of some joints like our knees, hips, and shoulders that lubricates the joint, reduces friction between the bone, nourishes cartilage, and acts as a shock absorber, allowing smoother movement. So decline in estradiol leads to less synovial fluid, increased stiffness, and pain at the joint. On top of all of the above, mobility is also an incredibly vital practice to maintain balance and prevent falls. Having control over our body in space is a key to mobility. Expecting a fall-free world? It's unrealistic, right? Eventually, we're probably all going to fall, but preparing a body to survive a fall without a trip to a hospital or worse, that is absolutely something we have control of at any age. We are never too late to take control of that. Mobile joints are far more resilient towards injuries. Think of rolling an ankle on a hike or stepping incorrectly off a curb, right? It's the difference between spraining your ankle and just sort of bouncing back because you catch yourself. And I don't know about you, but I have been thinking my mobility practices a lot this winter because Minnesota has been covered in ice across the board. So estradiol is super duper important and mobility is super duper important to continue living autonomously. I didn't really write about this, but I was thinking about it as I was reading some of the bullet points. This is another reason that it's worth finding a practitioner who is certified in menopause hormone therapy, because while we need more research into direct causations between estradiol and things like healthier joints, cartilage, increased lack of inflammation, a lot of practitioners who have been using hormone therapy for a while, and a lot of my clients who have gone on it, this is something that just anecdotally they've shared has been something they found relief with. So definitely worth checking out with your practitioner if this is something that works for you. As always, if you don't have a practitioner who is menopause certified, and you can always look on the Menopause Society website, they have a list of practitioners on their website who have gotten certified through them. MIDI Health is a great option. I swear one day I'm going to reach out to them to see if they want to team up because I love what they do. But MIDI Health has practitioners and a lot of them will take your insurance. Will take your insurance so that you can work with someone who is certified in menopause or hormone replacement therapy, menopause hormone therapy. Because again, if it even brings a little bit of relief to this is a hard one. Anyone who's experienced bodily pains, especially at the level that some women experience in menopause, it is debilitating, right? It can interrupt our sleep. It makes us feel really out of it during the day. It makes workouts really hard to get to. So that can be a really helpful thing just to sort of keep in the back pocket as bringing up to your doc. And hopefully we've talked about this a lot, symptom tracking, right? So we can bring our list of symptoms to our doctor and advocate for what we need. Moving on, how do we fit mobility into our daily or weekly routine without it feeling like a complete overhaul? I, at the time of this workshop, had just had a conversation with a woman who mentioned she was trying to work in mobility, but it was what she said was, I'm trying to work in mobility, but it's really hard for me to fit in 30 to 60 minutes every single day. And it reminded me of what I already know, but is always worth rehearing for me as a coach, that more common than not, we try to do something all at once. We try to do the most all at once. And we're in this world of like the more is better. And we try to do all the things all at once, right? So we're doing mobility, we're doing strength, we're getting our 10,000 steps, we're drinking 85 billion gallons of water, we're working on our nutrition, we're trying to get our stress under control. We're doing it all at once versus just a little bit, picking one thing and getting really proficient at it. And the cool thing about mobility specifically is that a little goes a really long way. So if you love mobility and you look forward to a longer mobility routine, heck yeah. But if, like this person I had talked to, it feels like straight up work, scheduling something else into your busy life, especially like 30 to 60 minutes, that's a whole other workout, right? The chances of you sticking to it, even if you like sort of get it down in the beginning for the first week or so, it's pretty slim. right? It's pretty slim that we're going to stick to it. So the truth is, the approach to a mobility practice is honestly pretty much the same approach we take to any new habit. Less is more, choose actionable baby steps, and expect to fall off, quotes here, and then pick yourself back up the next day. So a couple of ways to start including a mobility practice in a lasting way. First one, wake up and bedtime routine. And I'm not talking both. I'm talking either or, unless you want to do both, and then huzzah. But again, a little goes a long way. And I would rather have you do 5 minutes before bed than 0 minutes ever. This one is the one that I use a lot lately. I go through phases of being really on top of and really loving having a more elaborate mobility practice. But these days, my mornings start early. And at this point in my life, it's more important to me and my body and my brain to take advantage of my extra 10 minutes of sleep in the morning than to stretch. But I have found that I can stick to pretty regularly 5-ish minutes of hip mobility before bed, right? So I give Argo his treat, I close his crate, and then I'm already on the floor, so hip mobility it is. And if your schedule's the total opposite, that's fine. Probably is, could be. The point isn't to do what works for me or for your friend or for the fitfluencer who's shooting videos on a porch swing in Bali. It's to find what works for you and your schedule right now. And remember, that's likely to change at some point. And part of it is being okay that it's probably going to have to shift and change over time. So just figuring out what works. And honestly, if you're like, I'm going to do the bedtime routine, but I don't think I can do it 7 days a week, do it twice. Do it once. Once a week is an amazing thing to shoot for. And then as it becomes more and more of a no-brainer, add another day, right? Again, 5 minutes is way better than 0 minutes. Next up, this one's kind of cheeky. If you are a member of Fit After 40 Strength Training for Menopause, you get a free mobility workout every single Sunday. This is something that selfishly was born out of my desire and need to mobilize more because, like I said, I'm in a phase right now where prioritizing mobility, I'm building a business, I'm working on my own strength training. I just am very busy, so it doesn't easily slot in my life to do a 10-minute yoga video every morning and then a 10-minute bedtime yoga video, right? That's just not my life right now. So I needed more, and selfishly, I added it so that I can be accountable on Sundays and then my clients benefit and they can have a weekly session that is available just to them. And if they can't make it, the videos get recorded and they can revisit it over and over. So yet another perk of joining Fit After 40 Strength Training for Menopause. I got you, girlfriend. 3, extend your warm-up or cool down before or after your workout. This one seems simple, but again, it goes a really long way. So if you have 5 to 10 minutes on either side or both sides of your workout, enjoy yourself. Add it on in. 4, build mobility into your workday. I'm not talking about rolling out the yoga mat and banging out a 75-minute vinyasa flow, although if you can I have your job? I'm talking simple pockets of short but rejuvenating movement. Something as simple as rotating through the spine, standing up, twisting side to side, or doing a standing quad stretch, ankle stretch. Remember, a huge piece of our immobility, inflexibility epidemic is our sedentary lifestyle. Finding ways to actively break up our sitting throughout the day is an incredible and low barrier entryway to daily movement, better posture, happier joints, less pain, better gains. I think I've talked about this before here, but I recently was listening to a podcast that mentioned a study that talked about sitting obviously is not great for us, but one of the worst parts is uninterrupted sitting. So like 8 hours without any movement. So there were benefits shown for desk employees where even if they stood up every 25 minutes and just stood up, just interrupted sitting, there could be some positive benefits. Again, I would encourage, like, if you're going to stand up, little shakeouts, but if that's all you can do, 25-minute timer, stand up, shake it out, sit it back down. Huzzah. 5, find a yoga class you love. If you're in the Twin Cities area, I have a friend who owns a yoga studio. I am going to be reaching out to her pretty soon because she's also a really bad booty coach for, Kinsey, what the word? For babies, for postpartum. I told you, this is that jet lag. This is when it starts kicking in. So she is a postpartum coach as well. And a couple of you have requested that I bring an expert on for that. So stay tuned. That's going to be I'm reaching out to her probably this week. So hopefully we have her on the pod in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, she also owns a yoga studio here. It's called Carpe Diem. Reach out. I'll hook you up with her. But even you can find flows on YouTube if you're like, I'm not ready to pay for like a whole other whatever. Unlike the science behind progressive overload in strength training, we don't have to be quite as picky with things like yoga flows. You can even tailor your searches to specific areas and timeframes, like 25-minute yoga flow for tight hips. The one thing that I would be mindful of as you peruse the YouTube is finding flows that are within your practice level. So if you're brand spanking new, search something like beginner yoga flows or beginner mobility. Again, all mobility isn't yoga. So you can find mobility practices that are not yoga, but start with beginners. Because just like building up to things like our squats, heavy squats and deadlifts, there's a lot to be said for starting at the beginning with yoga and mobility in general. Get the foundations down before progressing into those intermediate classes, especially if you're coming off of injuries, have chronic pain, are postpartum, or someone who comments daily on how tight you are. The nice thing too is that when it comes to mobility, I'm not even talking about that like super hard heated vinyasa flow, unless of course that's what you love and you look forward to, but easy peasy does it, right? Look at things like yin yoga, hatha, iyengar, even chair yoga are wonderful practices. You can also easily build a mobility practice in on the same day you work out. I would argue it could be beneficial to do it on some cases. So yes, we, at least in Fit After 40, cool down after every workout, but just like building more NEAT into our days, that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the more opportunities we take to mobilize our body, the better. Not sure where to start? I have a series of 10 to 15 minute yoga flows on YouTube, which you can check out. I'll go ahead and pop those in the show notes. I also have longer flows, but I find that 10 to 15 minute is kind of a nice low barrier entry to get started. And again, 1 to 3 sessions per week, you're crushing the game. Don't do it at expense of your strength training. So if you're like, I can do 1 10-minute and that's it, amazing. So y'all, we talked a lot about mobility today, and I hope you are leaving this pod feeling inspired to explore mobility. Again, this is something that we can pursue just like strength training at any time, and it is beneficial for everybody, especially for those of us newer to movement, and especially those of us who live in a more sedentary lifestyle. This is a really, really not just like, it's a great practice. It's a non-negotiable for your overall health and wellness. So I'm just going to finish up this episode by doing a shout out one more time. When you are in Fit After 40, you get access to webinars like this that come complete with visuals, Q&As at the end. You also get access to that free Mobility Sunday, so you don't even have to think about programming it for yourself. It's just there for you. We do it together. We laugh. It's a Sunday. We take it easy, breezy, beautiful. And if you are not in the Twin Cities area, definitely check out the show notes. We only have 2 spots left in our Monday, Wednesday, Friday cohort. Our evening, the 5 p.m. Central on Monday and Wednesday and Saturday at 10, that's Central Time, that one is sold out now. So that one's totally closed. We only have 2 spots left in the morning one. So if that's something that you're interested in, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, check it out in the show notes. Get your spot, because like I said, these ones are going kind of like hotcakes, and I don't know when the next time I'm going to have open online spots available. If you are in person, same thing. Definitely hop on it. Our 6 a.m. is sold out completely. I have 1 spot left in a 7 a.m. and I have a couple of sessions left in my evening classes. So check it out. Just want to make sure that you are jumping on it so you do not miss your chance, because we probably know what to do. The issue isn't that we don't know what to do. It's that we don't have the accountability. So if we are waiting for the time, or waiting to find time, waiting until the time is right is what I'm saying. We're going to be waiting a long time. Your life is always going to be busy. There's always going to be something that comes up. It is time to prioritize your health, your body, your brain. And the first step is letting me help you. 2 workouts a week, plus this free mobility session. So check it out in the show notes. book your session. If you want to hop on a call and kind of chat about it first, let's do that. I have a link for a free consult call. Again, I would do that pretty fast because I can't guarantee how long these sessions are going to last. And I really, really, really want to make sure that you are getting started. Because as we know, in the words of Dr. Stephanie Estima, love her, best time to get started was 20 years ago. Second best time to get started is today. All right, team. Love you. Mean it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. As always, if you got something out of this podcast, like, share, leave a review. It takes all of 5 seconds to click 5 stars. Takes maybe like 3 minutes to leave a review or less. Just be like, great info. It means the world to me and really does a lot for the podcast. And if you're feeling really spicy, screenshot the podcast and tag me at kinsey.does.thefitness. And if you have any ideas that you would like addressed on the podcast, feel free to reach out in my DMs on Instagram or shoot me an email, kinsey@fitafter40.info. That's 4040. All right, team. Thank you so much for being here for my slightly jet laggy, but very enthusiastic conversation on mobility. I always look forward to your feedback. Thank you for your time. Until next week, take care of your amazing bodies and brains. You're so stinking worth it. Aroo!